Hello and welcome to Newspeak. I'm Peter Whittle. Newspeak being the weekly look at the news agenda. I'm joined here, pleased to say, as usual, by Rafe Heydel-Mankoo and Dr. Philip Kiszely, our senior fellows. Rafe is obviously a broadcaster and historian, and Dr. Philip here is from Leeds University. We're going to be talking about last week's record immigration figures and also about the events in Ireland, which are sort of linked in many respects to that. But before we do that, we went last week on Sunday to the big march, which was organised by the campaign against anti-Semitism. It got a fair amount actually of media coverage, I would say, actually. Philip, what was your impression of it? I mean, as overall?
Well, it got some media coverage on the Sunday, but it was dead by the Monday. So it just, nobody bothered with it on the Monday. My impression of it was, I thought it was extraordinary. There were upwards of 100,000 people. I think it was reported 105,000 people there. Bearing in mind the Jewish population of this country is 200,000, between 200 and 300,000. So a fantastic turnout, incredibly peaceful, very good-spirited. There was
no masks?
No masks, no anti-Muslim sentiments, no even mention of terrorism that I could see, really. It was just about bringing people home. And there was actually quite a lot of optimism there. I sensed a kind of optimism because Jewish people were marching with non-Jews, and there was a shoulder-to-shoulder togetherness, which I thought was just fantastic, and that atmosphere just was right there throughout the whole day.
Rafe, Boris Johnson was at the top there. How did you feel about that?
Well, I saw him there. I didn't see him on the march afterwards, which I found even more interesting. He actually showed up for the photo op, and then he disappeared, so he couldn't even be bothered to do the actual march with everybody else. But, I mean, the BBC first said that there were 60,000 until the police said actually there were 120,000.
Yes, 120.
So the BBC had to double their estimate. Normally, I've never seen them underplay something so much, which is quite interesting. But yes, it was the stark contrast between the Saturday marches and between this march on the Sunday. A very positive atmosphere, as Philip said. No one felt intimidated. There was no antisocial behaviour. There was none of that aggression or that tinderbox, as you felt everyone was going. No flares being let off. No one climbing scaffolding. And there were 4 times I heard "God Save the King." There was a respectful pause at the cenotaph, and we were fortunate to be right at the front, so we got to see where they were singing and so forth. And Union flags were fluttering alongside Israeli flags and others. And I thought, well, isn't that just a simple demonstration that they're actually proud to be British, as well as being concerned for things elsewhere? And, why couldn't the other marchers have done something similar? More disturbingly was the age difference, in fact that this was a lot older than the Palestinian marches had been. Again, an indication of the direction in which this country is going.
I think, yes, although it looked quite intergenerational.
Oh, there were a lot of young people there, but it was the Palestinian marches were a lot younger in general.
Yes, I think, I mean, this thing of singing the national anthem as well, we have to remember that actually prayers are always said for the royal family in synagogues, and national anthem is always sung. There was one thing that came out of it, which the press obviously just flew at, and that was that Tommy Robinson went along. And in fact, where we were standing when we first arrived, he was actually in this coffee shop just opposite us, and he was just in this coffee shop. And I think from what I could see, you can tell if I'm wrong, the police just waited for him to come out and then pounced on him. Now, the fact is that always people say this, whatever you think about what Tommy Robinson says, etc. To say it was heavy-handed, I think, is an understatement.
It's a complete understatement. I think there were about, 30 police officers who manhandled him, pepper sprayed him right in the face, dragged him away. He'd done nothing wrong. It was just because he was Tommy Robinson. If he would have been anybody else, it would have been perfectly okay. That is no kind of policing. That is no kind of justice. That's just intimidation. And of course, the day before, actually, with the marches, there were banners with blood libels on. There was chanting from the river to the sea. There was open anti-Semitism. Nothing, nada, not a single thing. So it's this two-tier policing that we talk about constantly, and very specifically for him, it's a bespoke kind of policing where he's not even allowed to walk the streets.
Because apparently the point is that he was there, but the organisers had asked him not to be there. That was their excuse, wasn't it?
So.
And the important thing was, he also said he was there as a journalist. So this actually was an attack on free speech if we're actually going after members of the press or a journalist in some capacity. Yeah, but however you want to look at it, Tommy Robinson was treated abominably by the police. I mean, 27 police guarding this area, pepper spraying him so close in the face. Utterly appalling, particularly, as you say, when we've had people calling for Muslim armies to rise up, as police stand idly by, twiddling their thumbs, watching all of this, watching people scale our monuments and doing nothing about it. The overreaction on this level is yet more incontrovertible evidence of two-tier policing existing in this country. And of course, it just undermines trust amongst the great British public when they see this clear...
Oh, there is none.
No, there is none.
And we've talked about on this programme time and time again. But that, the request from the organisers for him not to turn up is just a request. He's perfectly entitled to walk the streets with other people, and he's perfectly entitled to join the march, whether they want him or not, actually.
And he wasn't actually marching, let's just say. He never got into the march.
Well, yes, the reports were saying he wanted to try to get to the top of the march. I don't even think that was true.
No.
I mean, I don't know what the basis for saying that is, actually. But I mean, as you said, we've talked about it a lot. It's been one of my bugbears because I think the police are the sharp end of enforcing the law, right? Now, if they are basically as compromised and as corrupted as they appear to be now, and I think they are, then, I think it's really dangerous, actually, for the future. And we've seen that again as well in Ireland, actually, in a way. Because obviously what happened there, as you must know, obviously, by now, is that there was a stabbing by an Algerian immigrant. People here, I don't know, in Britain, are they aware quite the extraordinary amount of migration there's been into Ireland? I'm not sure that they are so aware, but what happened there is that there was this riot. Sure, there was looting and everything like that, but it was basically, what was so appalling about this was that the Leo Varadkar, who's the Prime Minister effectively of Ireland, essentially just concentrated on the reaction, didn't he, as opposed to the actual thing.
I think what happened was the narrative plays itself out, doesn't it? And the narrative in this instance inserted itself immediately. So the perpetrator just was vanished, the protagonist in this whole thing. And I think there were 3 children, 5 and 6, stabbed. Yeah.
And the
so
teacher,
that just completely goes, and then it becomes this far right narrative which is played out, and it's the same thing that plays itself out time and time again. And there were questions about the perpetrator. Is he an immigrant or isn't he? Is he Algerian? Isn't he? And then that, there's obfuscation there that makes it a whole lot worse. But the Prime Minister was then saying, oh, well, these people are radicalised because they're seeing stuff online, so we need to put this hate bill through. And of course, that's not true at all. They're seeing what's happening on the streets of their cities. They're seeing massive demographic change. They're seeing their culture eroded. They're seeing violence to women and children. And of course, people are going to react. They wouldn't be normal if they didn't.
I mean, the liberal elite love it when people like Tommy Robinson come out, or when we saw the reaction in Ireland, because it immediately lets them avoid addressing the real issue.
Well, there's almost a sigh of relief, isn't there?
That's just it,
because
had those riots not happened in Ireland, there would have been a reckoning on this issue of migration, because it's such a live issue. It's actually it's becoming more pronounced in Ireland even than here, because of the levels of immigration, where I believe 1 in every 5 Irish people now is an immigrant. They had 140,000 people arriving last year. This is in a country with 50 million, which equates to double. It's like us having 2 million gross immigration they've had essentially last year. And when you get to that level, you do have growing tensions. But the problem is, in Ireland, unlike here, they don't have something like the Reform Party or UKIP. They don't have anyone, or GB News. They don't have any outlets. So whilst the population feel just the same way as ours, there are no safety valves to let off any of that steam and anger. And there's a growing feeling in Ireland, at least, that this disconnect is wider than anywhere. Canada and Ireland are in a dead heat for getting the gold medal in the Woke Olympics.
You see, I couldn't help feeling when I saw him speaking, Leo Varadkar, that when he spoke about the people who rioted, right, it was such malice. He spoke about, if you ask people on the street who they hate you, right? They hate you. And I sort of felt, I couldn't feel, basically what you might call working class people are now public enemy number one, almost, aren't they? In almost any Western society. I don't know that they were all working class. I suspect many of them were, but basically when even you get a group of young working class white guys together, what do they think? They think fascists. That's the first thing they think.
Well, it's just the same process that works itself out in every one of these places, whether it's Britain, whether it's the States, whether it's anybody else, and it's the indigenous population is being othered, they become the villains of the piece, and all they're doing is reacting to all of the things that I said before. This incredible change and violence. Physical violence, but also sexual violence as well, because there's often an undercurrent of sexual violence from, let's have it right, hordes of young men who are coming into countries illegally and legally, who are, under 40 and from cultures that treat women as possessions and sexual playthings.
And what's most outrageous is the fact that they're now using this in Ireland as an excuse to put forward these draconian anti-hate laws, which are so scary. I mean, these are the most draconian laws in the world being put forward, where just having on your phone, if I send you a meme, just possessing a meme which may be deemed to be in some way racist or xenophobic, you can be arrested. And it's the inclusion of xenophobia. It's not just racist content and who defines what racist is. It's also xenophobic content. And what's deemed to be xenophobic? Complaining about the number of immigrants who are coming over to this country. So, we're all guilty of xenophobia by that very loose definition of the term. It's a clear attempt to simply stifle conversation now. And you know how dangerous it is when you try to stifle conversation. But it's such an insidious idea being put forward. I really can't believe it's serious, but it is.
It's also it's being left deliberately vague.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. And one of the issues with this is it's not only possessing stuff but preparing stuff as well. So if you're putting together a meme, you are actively breaking this hate law. The stupidity of it, as you've just said, actually, there is no public arena in which people can talk seriously, openly, and honestly about immigration. Rafe, you were just saying that there's no GB News, but there's no outlet for any of this stuff. So then to add draconian hate speech on top of that is just the most ludicrous thing to do. So yes, of course, we're going to see much, much more trouble. And when we see trouble in one place, it spreads to other places as well. It's not just going to be in Dublin; it's going to be in Belfast, and there's going to be more stuff in London too.
And remember, we just had Varadkar deliver a speech akin to that delivered by Hamza Useless. With this about there being too many white people in positions of power in Ireland.
Yes. All right. Okay. But there's one thing about this, right? And people have pointed this out quite rightly. Why do people keep voting for them? Why? This is the thing we always ask ourselves about the Conservative Party, okay? But if you think about him, the stuff that he said, not only about immigration, but also about the little girl who's just returned, who was a hostage from Hamas. Yes. Okay, he said she was lost and now found.
Yeah, lost and now found. Right. He's a right of centre politician. Supposedly, he's a right of centre politician. He's not left and woke. He's our version of Rishi Sunak, if you like. People vote for them, well, for various reasons, don't they? We know this, but people vote for them because they don't want the Labour Party in. They'll vote for them because they're the least crap version of the two things which are almost identical. And we're at the stage now, and I'm at the stage now where I'm telling everyone I know, right? yes, there is going to be a sense of real pain when the Labour Party come in, because they will come in. But the worst thing you can possibly do is keep the Conservative Party alive. We need to kill it stone dead. So vote for the smaller parties. Vote for Remain. Vote for SDP. I keep saying it all the time, but people just vote for these heritage parties because their parents voted for them, because they don't want the worse option, because they've always done it, because they don't think about things, because they've never heard of the SDP, you know? So it's not just about people doing the wrong thing, it's about the smaller parties stepping up and selling themselves.
Yeah, but don't underestimate the sheer power of the media.
Yeah.
Well, that's what,
They are basically like, if you think of this sort of society as like a full bottle full of water bursting, and the media is like this bottleneck that manages to squeeze through just acceptable things, you know? And there are people around this bottleneck who actually control it. And that's increasingly the feeling that I get, you know, in all of our countries, actually.
I mean, you have to remember, Ireland, of course, hasn't had as long to deal with all this stuff as we've had. So there, it's still, many people are still beginning to learn about all of this stuff, and because they've got the entire apparatus of the state working against them. It's the government, it's the media, it's the institutions. So there are very few places, if you're not on Twitter, there are very few places you actually can get access to the reality of what's happening. And it takes a long time for this message to seep through the wider population. That's one of the reasons that this is happening. But Varadkar, I'd say he's not even Rishi Sunak. I mean, Varadkar is economically a neocon, and he's socially liberal, which is the polar opposite of actually what the voter wants.
Yeah, because the voter wants SDP and reform. You know, it's this thing about controlling the narrative, isn't it? And the media and the blob and the politicians control the narrative. It's pulling that apart. It's unknotting it and letting people see what the reality is. I think most people know what reality is, and I think most people actually know what the media are doing. Not all, sure, but a lot of people do, and yet they still go back to the same old, same old.
And it's funny because Sinn Féin, I think 75% of Sinn Féin voters want migration stopped or paused, or in some capacity or other.
Speaking of which, obviously, as we all well know, is that last week they came out just before our last show. We missed it because we recorded it early. 768,000 net, right? And then 2022 was revised upwards, wasn't it? That was the previous record. So whether record or not, you're talking basically about 750,000 people, right? Every year, right? And one's being softened up actually to accept this, isn't it? There was a poll out by GB News, not by GB News, sorry, they quoted it, sorry, saying, I think, was it Matthew Goodwin's? Saying that 53% of British people now want a complete halt to migration. Not mass migration, not this, not that, a complete halt to migration. Are they going to get it?
No. People want a halt for 5 years, don't they? That's the first thing.
Well, that's what they were asked.
Yeah, that's what they were asked.
I imagine quite a few of those probably would say, actually, make it forever.
Well, this is the point I'm trying to make. So if we have a halt in migration for 5 years, what does that 5 years mean? Do we go back to astronomical levels on January the 1st of year 6? No. The 5 year, if it does happen, is the first stage of a complete reset, a complete conceptual change that essentially eradicates mass immigration. But it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. I mean, the only party putting forward this as a serious proposal is the SDP, where it's longer than 5 years. I mean, it really ideally needs to be a generation.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, you know, in America from the 1860s to from the 1920s to the 1960s. Was the greatest period of cultural unity. It was the golden age of America, and that's because they had almost no immigration, because they had vast amounts of immigration in the late 19th century from Europe and Eastern Europe and from China and so forth. And then they needed that time to breathe, as some breathing space to absorb. We need to do precisely the same thing, but there's simply no appetite for that amongst the governments and all the political parties aiming for that. And of course, 5 years is in and of itself too short a period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had more immigration last year than in the post-war period. 1945 to 2000, we had more immigration last year than that entire period. It's quite astonishing to think of it in those terms. We need to have a much larger breathing space. But the issue is, even when you debate this with people like the new Conservatives, this new grouping of Tory MPs who think that they're plugged into what the Red Wall think, they're talking about 200,000 immigration.
It's an astronomical
We
number.
need to get it back to what it was.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to have it in the tens of thousands, that was the original late 20th century level.
50, yeah.
of that.
I mean, basically, aren't Labour saying 200,000 as well? I think they're outflanking the Tories from the right. But I mean, now this is considered to be considered to be more, as they put it, Labour put it, more normal numbers.
No,
it's not normal.
But
It's not.
spin.
It's 250,000 people.
Well, it's 1.2 million gross. So even though they've revised the net figures, the gross figure is still the same. 1.2 million people have come in the last year out of a population of 70 million.
But
Doesn't take long.
But do you know what's really depressing about the whole thing? If for some reason it did happen, it's not going to happen, but if it did happen, imagine how the people in power, imagine how the Remainers, imagine how the radical left, imagine how they would respond to it. You know, it'd be like Brexit on steroids.
Yes,
you know?
Brexit would seem like a picnic.
Yeah, so it would be completely sabotaged at every level, and lefty lawyers and all the rest of it. So if it did happen, it'd almost be more depressing, because you would just see society just completely disintegrate.
But you mentioned a good point about Brexit, because you know, mass migration has been the greatest act of national harm, the single biggest issue, far more consequential to this land than Brexit or the EU. And yet we never had a referendum, we never had a vote on any of that.
Of course
and
not.
there should be, of all issues, this was the question over which there should be a referendum. And I think a party should actually call for a referendum on this issue. I think it would be such a huge vote winner if Reform called for a referendum, and we know the results of that referendum would be even greater than the vote for Brexit.
Yes.
And it seems to me as if this is surely something which someone needs to grab.
And it really would be an era-defining moment. We talk about all these things as era-defining moments. You know, if a conflict in the Middle East can tear our society, the fabric of our society in two, imagine what a referendum on mass immigration would do.
Well, you say it's to tear it in two, but at the same time, I think we've agreed that what's happened in the Middle East and the way in which it's played out on our streets has woken people up. They're not quite even sure why, many people, I think, but they know that something is not. This is not right. Actually, this is entirely alien to us, and they're quite right. I mean, I think your point. I was actually about to make the same point. Actually, Reform are missing a trick, actually, because Reform have got this policy called zero net migration. And they think, that basically, they said it, for example, at our conference in immigration, didn't they? They think that even just the word zero is going to kind of, bring people on board. But you know what that means, net zero migration? You know, we all know what it means. It means 1 in, 1 out. So essentially, it means you could have 2 million in, 2 million out. Fine.
But that means that actually their proposals are twice as bad as Labour's, because we've had 500,000 leave or 600,000 leave. So their net zero is actually 500,000.
The best thing that
It's equivocation, but it's equivocation on the worst possible terms.
But the best thing they could do is they could actually just, how should I put it? Pay homage to the SDP or something, and just take that policy, as you say, you said referendum, or just have this, make it, we're going to have a zero mass migration for this amount of time. And honestly, they would go, because people are putting a lot of faith into Reform now. I know you just notice it online, they're saying, Reform, yes, Reform. Do you know what they're proposing with this most important issue? And that's the problem. But I mean, one thing one thing one should maybe be optimistic about is there was a piece in the Telegraph today, for example, saying about how the elites, not that we should care about, we have to care because they're so powerful, even they are seeing their kind of orthodoxies crumble about migration. And I think that is something happening, isn't there, on this front? So we shall certainly be chronicling it, I think, as it goes on. Rafe, thank you very, very much indeed. Thanks very much for it. And on that note, we shall see you next week. In the meantime, do have a good week, won't you? Bye. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.